We're off to the States now because Human Rights Watch is calling for a thorough and transparent investigation into how bin Laden was killed. Let's talk to Andrea Prasow with the group's Counter-Terrorism program, Terrorism and Counter-Terrorism program, joins me now from Washington, D.C. A lot of people will be saying, what did he just say? They want an investigation into this?
Well, I don't think that at this point an investigation is necessary, but it is important that the U.S. disclose all of the circumstances around bin Laden's killing. And it's important that the world can understand exactly what took place and understand the legal framework in which it may have taken place.
Why?
Well, bin Laden was killed in Pakistan in an ordinary city. And ordinarily a city in the middle of a relatively peaceful nation would not be considered part of an armed conflict, whereas parts of Afghanistan and other parts of Pakistan, of course, are. So you have to ask yourself, was this an armed conflict? Did the U.S. forces have the authority to essentially shoot to kill? And if they did not, they should have engaged in ordinary law enforcement. And law enforcement activities require that you first try to arrest someone peacefully. Then, of course, if they resist, you can use lethal force if appropriate.
You're suggesting there that perhaps this was not an armed conflict. This was a man who undeniably had been responsible for the deaths of thousands of people, the vast majority of them Muslims. If that isn't an armed conflict, what is?
Well, it's a legal question, and what I'm suggesting is that it's important to understand the circumstances so that we can understand if, in fact, it was an armed conflict. And one of the relevant factors there is, was Osama bin Laden
I'm saying, sorry, listen, in what way was it not an armed conflict?
Well, Al-Qaeda is the organization with which the U.S. has been in an armed conflict. And because bin Laden was in a civilian city and didn't appear to be, at the moment, as far as we know, actively engaging in armed hostilities, we have to ask whether he was, in fact, directly participating in hostilities.
If in 1945 Hitler hadn't taken his own life and had been killed during what happened in Berlin, would you have said the same thing about him? We need an investigation into how he was killed?
Well, it's important to understand we're not calling for an investigation. At this point, it's the responsibility of the U.S. government to simply inform the world of the circumstances. But World War II was an international armed conflict governed by a different set of legal procedures. And the war with Al-Qaeda has been a non-international armed conflict, which again has a different set of legal procedures applicable to it.
All right, one final question. In what way has it not been an international armed conflict when so many people on so many different continents internationally have lost their lives?
Certainly it's been a global conflict, and the devastation wrought by Al-Qaeda around the world is so shocking it's hard to even understand. But technically, under the Geneva Conventions, an international armed conflict is one between actual states that have signed those conventions. And Al-Qaeda is not a state and hasn't signed the Geneva Conventions.
All right, Andrea Prasow, thank you very much indeed, talking to us on behalf of Human Rights Watch out of Washington, D.C.